right, we are just at the top of the hour. So welcome everyone to this episode of Dave and Dave Discuss. And today we're going to dive into the topic of the ongoing Hyland Saga. My name's Dave Jones, and with me today, as ever, is Dave Giordano. Dave, great to be doing this again, and really looking forward to getting into this topic.
Yeah, I think it should be fun.
Should be a lot of fun. And thank you all for joining us today. For those of you who've been with us before, you know that both Dave and I have been in and around the information management space for many years, but you'll also know that neither of us are particularly shy about sharing our opinion, and I don't see any reason why that will change today. Look, we've previously talked on some of these sessions about topics such as the lack of innovation in the ECM space, and also about the impact that acquisitions have had in the space, in particular those made by Hyland Software. And guess what? We're back to talking about Hyland today, not because they're the only topic in the industry, but because they keep giving us such good things to talk about. And look, before we go on, we know Hyland is a major force in the ECM industry. We've already talked about that. We talked about their acquisitions of folks like Nuxio, Brainware, and Alfresco. But today we're going to talk about three specific areas that are piquing our interest at the moment. First of those is the fairly recent news on how Hyland is financed. Then we're going to take a look and discuss the fact that Hyland have got a new CEO. So we'll talk about the new CEO, we'll talk about the outgoing CEO. And then finally, we'll wrap things up and start talking about our thoughts on the Hyland Experience Automate platform. Which is the new offering from Hyland, and what the future looks like for Hyland in general. So that's the lay of the land for today. So, Dave, let's kick things off. Let's start by talking finance, right? So Hyland appears to have done a little bit of jiggery-pokery with regards to some debt consolidation recently. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I think that, the part is, as a firm owned by Thoma Bravo, as a PE, we don't get the same glimpse into their financials that we would an OpenText or another public company. But you do hear little thoughts every once in a while. So Bloomberg and some other stuff reported that, Hyland had refinanced, and that gives you a little bit of a glimpse into, PE firms and how they work with software. And so the last fall with Golub, who does real estate and other stuff, they refinanced basically $3.4 billion of debt. And so if you look at Hyland and how that relates to how they go through operations, that $3.4 billion in debt, I think it was 600 basis points over the secured overnight financing rate, which is at a discounted price of 98.5. It's somewhere in that 11 to 12% range. And, that you look at that and you say that's in the 350 million, somewhere in between 300 and 400 million dollars of interest per year. And as Dave, as you and I know, Hyland around $1 billion, maybe a little bit more than $1 billion. That's a significant amount of debt. They've obviously used some of that debt to pay off the Thoma Bravo, share as they bought. That's not all the debt just for buying Alfresco and Nuxio. But that's kind of an operations thing. That's kind of how PE firms work. So as we look to evaluate Hyland and the role in the future and who might be their acquirer of them, given that amount of debt, a lot of the different, we're going to talk about a lot of the different discussions around layoffs and profitability and offshoring all come into, hey, that is a lot of debt for kind of for any company, let alone $1 billion software.
It is a lot of debt. It's an awful lot of software that you've got to sell or maintenance that you've got to renew every year before you even start, right? But how does that compare to some of the other companies that we do have access to their financials? Maybe OpenText, right?
Yeah, I know, and that's the one we kind of, if we benchmarked against them, and now OpenText has a significantly more revenue, right? So 5.89 billion when I looked it up, but they have 8.65 billion in debt. So it's not, it's the amount, but compared to the ratio, if you think of the ratio, revenue compared to debt, OpenText is 1.4, where Hyland is somewhere in the 3.5. So it's almost double the ratio of that kind of public company to give folks a kind of a benchmark. I do think, being part of Thoma Bravo helped them get that much debt. I don't know if a firm by themselves could manage that type of multiple.
All right. So the obvious question then is, that's an awful lot of debt, as I say. How does that impact their operations? How does that start impacting their future? What do you see they'll do differently, or they'll have to do differently, right?
Well, it really puts a push on profitability to service that debt, right? So, as well as to pay the Thoma Bravo shareholders too. So it doesn't leave, a lot of, you can either increase revenue, which in a declining market, that's going to be kind of hard to do without inflating clients' without getting new customers or inflating prices, or reduce expenses. When you think about the reduced expenses, then the layoffs, the offshoring, all of that kind of Twitterish stuff of, hey, can we do more with less, makes a lot of sense, and as we kind of transition and talk about the CEO, I think what you and I both agreed on, how is the new CEO successful? For Thoma Bravo, it's how do you increase profits, right? That's going to be the number one way they're going to evaluate that CEO, because like we said, that's a lot of debt to service, as well as Thoma Bravo isn't a non-for-profit. They would like some distributions as well.
Cool. And we'll talk in more detail about Thoma Bravo and what they might be up to, and what the potential exits might look like. But you mentioned the new CEO. Let's shift our focus and start talking about the new Hyland CEO, Jitesh Ghai. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I haven't. And Mr. Ghai comes from Informatica, software company in the data management. They used to be an extract, transform, and load company, if anyone can remember that phrasing. A lot of data migration. Ghai was executive vice president and chief product officer at Informatica. Sorry, not a CEO, executive VP and product officer. And I think that's interesting as we look at the new solutions that are coming out of Highland. But all things being equal, he appears to have played a pretty key role, a pretty pivotal role in making Informatica a cloud leader. And he also seems to have steered that product innovation within Informatica, including the development of their AI capabilities. So all of that said, Dave, what do you think Ghai's leadership will do in terms of influencing Highland's direction, given everything that we've just said about finance, given the fact that there are new products coming out, and there's an array of overlapping products in their portfolio at the moment, right? So what do you think Ghai's leadership will do around those areas?
I think that, the two parts of, obviously, you can evaluate software firms by profitability, but there's also this valuation of, can I attach my software firm to a growing space, right? And, we see cloud used to be the big one. Now it's all about AI. So bringing in a new CEO that can help get that AI moniker on Highland, I think it's a stretch from they're always going to be seen as a content management company. But, through acquisition or through other, internal development, a new CEO is going to have a much easier time getting that type of valuation with AI than Bill Priemer, an old-time ECM guy like you or me would. So I definitely think, that allows them to say we're more AI. He can bring in AI people. They can bring in AI products around it as part of that new change. And that's something that that Bill, as a long-term ECM guy, just couldn't do.
All right, and let's talk about Bill Priemer for a second. Retiring Hyland CEO, I was lucky enough to meet Bill on a number of occasions when I worked at Highland a while ago now. One of the most genuine, likable guys you could ever wish to meet, and he was part of the furniture at Highland, right? He joined, I think, I don't even know how many years ago. He was one of the first 10 employees, I think. He joined to lead their marketing. I believe Bill was responsible for the baseball field booth that was at one of the big AIM shows. A lot of people on the call might not be old enough to remember that, but we certainly do, Dave. It was marketing genius. And Bill has been fundamental and core to developing Hyland as a family. And that's one of the things that certainly when I was there was this huge family spirit. This isn't a company, this was a family that you were joining. I joined at the same time as a whole load of graduates from Ohio State University. And they were there, as far as they were concerned, with a job for life. And that shift that's happened in the past 3-4 years with numerous layoffs happening must have really shaken Bill to the core. And it shook Hyland to the core, right? This wasn't something that Hyland did. But they have over the past 2 or 3 years, or 3 or 4 years rather. And I think that must have been difficult for Bill. You've got to wonder with people that are, in an organization, in a family like that for so many years, what sort of promises have been made by the CEO to various people about career progression? What sort of promises have been made to customers about features that are going to come downstream and roadmaps and stuff? And all of these things have sort of, they depart with Bill Priemer, right? And I got to say, I wish Bill the best and the happiest retirement ever. I genuinely do. He's a lovely guy, and I wish him all the best. But the fact that he was a good guy rolling through all of those different areas, Guy doesn't have the same loyalty to either the Hyland staff, the Hyland customers, or anybody. And I'm concerned that might actually lead to even deeper cuts than we've seen across the past 3-4 years. There were a lot of the Hyland meritocracy, if you like. A lot of people that have been there for an awful long time that got let go in the last couple of rounds of layoffs. I can see that happening again because they are the expensive resources within the organization. And as we look at that large amount of debt that needs servicing every year, you talked about cost cutting, doing more with less. Like I say, Guy doesn't have that same background and that same emotional attachment to some of the staff, some of the customers, some of the products maybe even. And with new initiatives coming in, like Hyland Experience Automate Platform, interesting anagram. That's heap. I don't know what it's a heap of. We'll find out, I guess, in the coming years and months. But at the moment, it seems like a lot of marketing fluff rather than substantial products. And it's going to be really interesting to see if they gain traction and how Guy brings that forward, brings it all together, and makes it work. That said, that brings us around a little bit to talking about Hyland Experience, right? Oh, sorry, Dave.
I'd love to get your thoughts, Dave. Before we talk about that, I always thought Hyland, deep commitment to Cleveland. Another thing I think that from a CEO side, and especially with remote offices and other stuff, what we saw with Alfresco when they got bought by T.H. Lee was they moved the headquarters to Boston, right? Because that's where T.H. Lee was from. I would say if Hyland wants to become an AI company, that's not going to be Cleveland, right? So you start to see even the, and I think a real, quick test would be, hey, where does the new CEO spend the bulk of his time? Because that's where the bulk of his team and the initiatives are gonna happen. And then I think the other folks, with that much debt, and I think you've already seen, was it Westfield or where some of the different buildings from Hyland where they're starting to scale down to have these remote workers. So you lose. I think there's something you lose about that culture of it was a Cleveland culture with Cleveland guys, just like Chicago culture with Chicago guys. For me, when you get this diverse, we're going to work from anywhere with a new management team. What's your thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely right. It's a great point. And I think the other thing is that, Hyland was heavily influenced by Cleveland, but Cleveland has been heavily influenced by Hyland, right? It's a huge employer in the area, in that Westlake area, just out about 15 miles to the west of Cleveland. Hyland was building pre-COVID a huge campus there. they had 4 or 5 buildings within a 2 or 3 square mile area, and everything was being built around that family ethos, around the fact, there was daycare there were hairdressers and salons and the gyms and everything that you could possibly want to have a great on-site working experience. And look, when I worked there, I was working as a remote employee from the UK. And that was really difficult for a lot of the on-premise or Westlake-based staff to get their head around, because they just weren't used to that. And every single acquisition that happened, has brought in remote offices. It's brought in people that aren't part of that core group of Clevelanders. And, that's been difficult for them to deal with from an integration perspective, if nothing else. But, I think with Bill Priemer leaving, with the likelihood of more and more things leaving Cleveland and leaving Westlake, I think not only will Hyland suffer, but Cleveland will suffer as a result, alongside of that. So yeah, it's a huge impact.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about some positives. Like I say, the Hyland Experience Automate platform. Hyland have been talking about it a lot. But from the ads, I really can't tell what it does. I sat down and watched this is how it works video. And all I got were buzzwords thrown at me: cloud, AI, no code, but no real substance. So I genuinely don't know what it is. Have you had any more luck at trying to figure out what sits underneath the hood?
You're the marketing guy, right? You know how the part of, hey, we want to put all the buzzwords in. So yeah, AI, cloud, no code, automation, this point, and Alfresco always went there too. We want to be more than just the repository, because I think they realize the repositories being, it's not worth as much as it used to be. We talk about Amazon S3 and Microsoft and Google and other people that can do repository stuff. So they want to be more embedded in the business process, hence for Alfresco is process services. My understanding of Experience is kind of a combination of that process services with maybe the Nuxio kind of NoSQL backend. We talked about this before in Disruption. This has all the trademarks of Documentum Leap. It's got a similar acronym, but Documentum Leap was going to be the cloud-based new platform. I think the struggle that Hyland is going to have is this isn't something that their customers are asking for. This is something engineering is building, thinking that they want. And, we've always, at TSG, we were always afraid of this build it, they will come type thing. I just don't think the brand of Hyland right now is something, especially given raising prices, audits, and other stuff that I've heard they're doing to maintain or enhance that customer revenue, that a customer is going to want to, I'll commit to your business process engine and new repository. I think a lot of folks similar to FileNet from IBM or when FileNet got bought by, they have the repository, they want to keep working with it, they don't want it to break. They're not asking to have to pay more for something that they have to redesign the business with. I think it's a stretch. We'll have to see. I think we can't evaluate it till we start seeing customer testimonials, and that's what we never saw with Leap, right? Nobody ever came out and said this is the best thing ever. So when it's in this early stage, until they have customers that are saying it's successful and are willing to spout how successful it is, for us, it's just engineering and marketing speak. What's your thoughts having you're around when the Documentum Leap stuff came out? I thought it was interesting, but none of my clients had any interest.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I love the observation that this is engineering driven innovation, if you want to call it innovation. The concerning thing for me, look, what they're building is a Frankenstein solution, right? It's got bits of Alfresco, it's got bits of Nuxio, it's got bits of Allbase. But the resulting thing, if it's anything like Leap, will actually do a lot less than any of those individual parts did in the first place, right? So customers that have built solutions on top of, Alfresco, Nuxio, they're not going to want to move to a new platform that doesn't give them all the functionality that they already have. And honestly, I don't see a huge amount of opportunities out there for people wanting this pared down cloud-based solution that doesn't do as much as any of those individual pieces. It reminds me a lot of Leap, because that was exactly the feedback that I certainly heard when Leap was rolled out. Interestingly, similar staffing or similar influences in this. One of my former bosses, a guy called Chris McLaughlin, who I worked with at Nuxio, I know was heavily involved in the Leap rollout. He's now Chief Revenue Officer at Highland. So don't know how much commonality or coincidence there is there, but it looks interesting. Let's put it like that. And it's going to get eyeballs because of the buzzwords that they're throwing out. But you got to do more than that. You and I both know that selling a platform nowadays is a difficult job, because people don't want platforms; they want solutions. And Leap at least had 3 or 4 solutions that it purported to offer. But to your point, I don't remember seeing any customer testimonials saying this is the best thing since sliced bread. And I think, Highland have got 2 challenges. One is keeping their existing customers satisfied, and they're not going to be satisfied by having to move platforms. The other one is bringing new customers in, and there's nothing there at the moment to attract me as a new customer to that platform. And the other interesting thing, if you think about it, a lot of people now are starting to adopt the content services model properly. So they're working with different elements to do different things, right? And the Highland Experience Automate platform is going completely flying in the face of that, right? People have got AWS or Google Cloud to store content now. They're using AI from over here. They're using RPA from over there. They're using Capture from over there. They don't want one thing. That concept of one solution to rule them all has gone. And I just, maybe the Experience platform will be the conductor, the conduit to bring all of that together. And if it is, then they will be hugely successful. But they need to actually tell us what the hell the plans are and how that's going to work to do it, right?
And I just struggle with, it's another layer on top of a 20-plus-year-old layer of layers of code, right? And the support side of that, when we had our disruption discussion, I had said, hey, I think disruption comes from something built from scratch, because you can push down both innovation of building it from scratch on Amazon or Microsoft or whatever else, as well as, you don't have to carry this baggage of all this other stuff. And you can have a pricing model that's a disruptive. Highland can never have a disrupting pricing model, because they to service that debt and everything else, they need to keep the revenue up. So, why we're both kind of excited about Vacubella or other startups like that. The starting from scratch lets you hit both the technology with a clean stack, as well as a price point that can be disruptive. So, the innovator's dilemma would say it's very unlikely that Highland can, sacrifice their current revenues to pursue this innovation like more of a startup could. So it's interesting, if people said, well, what are the odds? I'd say less than 5% that it hits, because it'll get shown to clients. Clients will say, not yet. But if you're the new person in the IT staff evaluating this stuff, do you want to go with something from Highland, or do you want to go with something from Amazon and Google or Microsoft? You're gonna go with something that builds your resume, not and has a huge, massive amount of AI and other investments. Then you are going to go with somebody that you've never heard of before, probably.
And the interesting thing there, right, another strand to that innovator's dilemma is Highland, when they made these acquisitions, got access to an awful lot of really innovative, really smart technology and strategic staff. An awful lot of those have now left Highland, some of them by choice, some of them by layoffs. Those guys are all out there pretty much starting new businesses. You mentioned Docuvela. There are other businesses that are spinning out from the debris that Hyland have just thrown out in the trash. And that's where you're going to see innovation. You mentioned, building things on top of AWS and Google Cloud. That's where I'm really excited to see the market trend in the next couple of years. And it's just going to get harder and harder for Hyland. Like you say, they're that big company now. It's hard for a big company to innovate anyway. They've lost most of their innovative staff. The interesting thing, though, the new CEO is a product guy. So you got to wonder, when he comes in properly and gets his feet under the table, does he like the Hyland experience, automate platform strategy, or is he going to rip that up and do something completely different? We shall see. We shall see.
Well, and that was Leap, right? It was. I had one of the product managers once tell me it was a 4-letter word. And yeah, it is a 4-letter word, but it looked good, but it didn't sell. And that's the dilemma of any software is, does it sell? And does the company have the patience to continue to market it and wait till it sells versus other initiatives or other things that they're doing? And it's just hard to see, the Alfresco software is going to be 4 years old, or Alfresco acquisition 4 years old in October. I think the Nuxio is 4 years old in March.
Mm-hmm.
This has sat on the shelf for a long time. Like you said, the engineers that came on board with it have moved on to other things. It's hard to see. And we got a new product manager who's not an ECM guy. So it's going to be hard to see as far as where this goes. I think the odds are kind of small.
I think they are. Again, one sort of tangential thought that's just hit me. Obviously, Informatica are in a very different space. But it's sort of an adjacent space, if that makes sense. It could be an interesting move to start bringing ECM and the more data. So the unstructured data world and the data world a little bit closer together. I have no idea what that would look like and if there's any play in there. But again, we shall see. And I think the other thing that happens and is happening is that I'm aware of customers of certainly the on-base platform that have been told that all of this new product activity is delaying bug fixes, any updates, any innovation on the existing platform that all of those customers currently have. I'm hearing that customers have been told that there aren't going to be any new features for at least 12 months. Now, that's going to make people look elsewhere.
Well,
the market is going to shift, right?
I think like the FileNet stuff, some customers don't touch it at all because I don't want you to break it. I don't want you to force me into an upgrade. So I would say I'm not surprised by that. I think, you saw with FileNet and IBM, and you saw with Documentum and OpenText, we don't have the resources to enhance this anyway. And if we enhance it and it breaks, you get mad at us. That's not a winning formula for, hey, pay me more money if it breaks, or
sure.
If I'm down or whatever else. So that I think there's a risk to the brand that, if it breaks, you have to help me fix this thing. If it doesn't get fixed, then I think clients, or if there's some sales pressure to buy more or other type of software audit is what Documentum did a ton of. Sure. You have a lot of pressure on the brand that says, hey, this company doesn't want to work with that brand anymore. And Hyland has that risk with aggressive sales techniques and audits. And like you said, with Bill, maybe promises that aren't kept or whatever with the new CEO. I think it's more of that kind of risk than it is a technology risk. I've always said the technology risk is a nibble thing. Hey, we used to do invoicing with Hyland, now we're doing it over here. Hey, we used to do SOPs with Alfresco, now we're doing it over here. So I think it'll nibble away at it rather than I'm going to build something else for a big ECM one-size-fits-all platform. But I think it's that nibbling away, and when the brand is getting hit, then there's, hey, let's move these users off of Hyland to somewhere else, for this application, and start winding it down. That's what we would typically recommend to clients.
Yeah, and I guess as you sort of alluded to, a lot of the customers don't want the thing to break. So this isn't a solution that they can literally just up and buy something else off the shelf and quickly migrate. So I think cautious concern is the general feeling that I'm getting from a number of the Hyland customers. Just thinking elsewhere, let's think about the other side of the fence, the analysts. Their reactions that I'm seeing to what's going on at Hyland are muted at best, right? Likely because Hyland's a significant revenue source for them. Hyland's got very, very good at working the analyst, particularly about what's coming. The analysts have been talking about this experience platform for a while. You got to wonder whether the analysts are the one that are pushing Hyland to a degree towards that central cloud-based vision for the future. You could argue that that's not what the customers actually really want, but then again, you could argue that some analysts are a little bit out of touch with customer sentiment anyway, right?
Well, and I think you're hitting as an analyst, if Highland's asking them what should we do, analyst is going to say AI, cloud-based, no code, all the things that are in the experience thing is that's what we recommend any companies to do. Whether they're talking to the clients about the brand and whether the clients want to buy that from Highland, that's a bigger stretch because that's a different conversation with a different group of people. And I always just think it's what I thought we had an advantage of on the consulting side is I had paying clients that would tell me when I did something wrong. And the tough part about talking to potential clients or talking to existing clients is getting to that right person who will tell you when you're doing something wrong rather than just head nodding. So, I don't know if, from it's not through the sales rep, right? The sales rep is never going to tell you that the customer's mad at them or whatever else. It's got to be with somebody who has, and what we had was a day in, day out consulting relationship with them where they would give us their honest feedback. I relied on those trusted advisors that we had. It's harder when you get into a software firm and you're changing people and, I remember people telling me they hated Documentum and I go, it's just a brand. Everybody you hated there, it's gone. Why are you so mad at this brand? Well, because at some point in the past, somebody had done something. I think that's what concern you would have about the Hyland brand is how much does the push for revenue affect the brand from the customer standpoint? And are they giving that advice, to Hyland versus, I have some customers that have Hyland on the no-fly list because they're mad at it for X, Y, or Z.
Which brings us nicely back to Hyland's majority shareholders, right? Thoma Bravo. Remind us of their history with Hyland, because I want to start looking at what they might do in the future.
Yeah, I think it's totally unique. Trying to predict, a PE firm is going to hold on to a company for 17 years. That isn't, the typical thing. So they've kind of used it to consolidate and buy, and kind of in a SPAC-ish way or whatever. Bring in Alfresco, bring in Nexio, bring in Brainware, to build into this billion-dollar business, and use the debt to fund dividends and profits. So, it's a different model than you'd get from most PE firms. The PE firms you always heard, they need to exit in 5 years.
Sure.
We're 3 times that and counting. So, with all that debt, it's tough to see someone else, getting the leverage they need to buy Hyland, depending on the valuation with the current interest rates the way they are, without a big decrease in interest rates or something else. So I would predict that Thoma Bravo is going to keep on for the foreseeable future because, this is uncharted territory for most PE firms and for Thoma Bravo as far as for holding on to something for 17 years. What are your thoughts about why they held on to it for so long?
That's a great question. I don't know is the honest answer. If you compare them to the only other company in the space that are doing similar things, you compare them to OpenText, right? Someone once joked to me that OpenText aren't a software company; they're a private equity firm in disguise. And to a degree, that's what Hyland's becoming, right? They're acquiring companies, they're building a portfolio, and they're just becoming that engine. Now, the interesting thing there is that Hyland, to my mind, haven't bought or haven't made any significant acquisitions since Alfresco and Nuxio, right? There's been a couple of little ones, but nothing drastic. So there could be reasons for that. I'm sure there are in the background, but you could argue, certainly a couple of years ago, that the rumor mill was having a field day saying, look, Highland's up for sale. I think because they're private equity owned, they're always up for sale. It's just how strong those conversations are. The question is, who would want to buy Hyland at the moment from Thoma Bravo? We've had conversations before about some of the hardware manufacturers, the scanner and printer companies that are looking for a way into software, but that's now a very, very expensive company with an awful lot of debt to go out and take a punt on. And I can't see it happening. You could argue that maybe companies start getting spun off and pieces of that portfolio get sold, but then, where's the real benefit in that? If you buy Alfresco, don't really do much with it for 3 or 4 years and then sell it off, it's not going to go at a profit.
No, and I think the value of an Alfresco or something, that the brand has been not hurt, but it's been almost discontinued. All of it, you look up Alfresco, you just get the Hyland website, right?
Sure.
There's no brand, there's no people, there's no engineers. I think I was there when Alfresco or TH Lee was approached by one of the major vendors. I'm not going to speculate on which one.
Sure.
And that put Alfresco in play shortly after they bought TSG, and then it was an open bid, right? Like, hey, it's hey, people come for you. So I don't know if necessarily Thoma Bravo putting it up ends in a sale, or if someone else who approaches them, because they do have this girth of clients, right? So if you look at Highland, maybe an Epic or somebody on the hospital side would say, hey, we're side by side with these guys so much anyway, or something else, that you might have somebody strategically kind of kicking the tires or something like that. But similar to Dell buying EMC, then, now Documentum is not worth anything to Dell, so it gets sold to OpenText. I think this one's a little bit different because Documentum was isolated within EMC as a brand and as a software company. I think as they blurred between these things, the pieces aren't really worth that much anymore because they've lost all the people in the supporting infrastructure.
Yep.
So I think it'd have to go it would stay as a whole, but IBM still makes money off of FileNet. So I don't know if there's something to say that a PE firm with a longer term focus can say, hey, I'm happy just getting this revenue, interest rates go down, I can refinance that debt where that interest rate goes down, and look how much it's paying now. And as we've said, it's hard to migrate from a content management platform. So, having lock-in into a client, there's a lot of software firms that don't have that benefit that you can switch off anytime you want. I think the content management, it's a tougher move.
I think you're right. Let me throw one name out. The new CEO has come from Informatica. Any play there for Informatica to potentially purchase, merge? I'm just throwing it out there.
We've always talked about documents and data, right? And Informatica, as somebody who gets key insights from data, a lot of the documents that we've managed for clients are transactional. There's not a lot of detail in there that's not already in the data. So I don't necessarily see that as a play unless it's more of a, consolidated open text type model where it's saying, hey, more revenue is better than others, as you said, as a PE firm. Let's take that revenue and that customer base and try to cross-sell our solutions to them as well. That could be a play. That's how, Hyland went after Alfresco and Nuxio, right? With that same kind of customer brand.
Yep. Interesting. We shall watch and no doubt discuss this again at some point in the future. And look, we've covered an awful lot today. But just before we wrap up, I want to just think about what the key takeaways are from the chat today. For me, I think it's clear that Hyland is at a crossroads, right? They've got significant debt that they now need to service. They've got a new CEO coming in. There's a market that's evolving faster than they can deal with outside of their four walls. And for me, that the future or the success in the future really depends on how well those things come together. You know, how well that new CEO can come in and manage that debt, find some innovation from somewhere, and maintain the trust of those existing customers, let alone finding new ones. That's my sort of take on what we've discussed today. But Dave, what about you?
No, I think it's the same thing, and I do think it comes back to the customers and the employees, right? As we've talked about, you know, how is the new CEO successful from a Thoma Bravo standpoint? Increase revenue, decrease expenses. That's kind of easy. But how do you make customers happy, and how do you make employees happy, given the amount of funds that are funneled into that debt in Thoma Bravo service? That's a hard play. And like I said, I think if you start to see customer testimonials rather than the marketing fluff, then they're being successful with that strategy, right? Getting customers to want to, you know, to actively be an active promoter of your services is something that you see. I just think in the downturn of I'm going to extract as much money as I can from customers, you don't see that at all. You see more of everybody loves us, but nobody's willing to talk about it. So I have to see where that kind of goes. They're at a crossroads, especially with the new CEO. We'll see in the next 6 months to a year as far as where he leads them. And, you know, like we were saying, maybe this is the thing that, you know, gets other folks interested in, you know, because it's the last tie to the old Highland family business to be in the more open thing. So I got a lot out of just your discussion of knowledge of Bill and Cleveland and the older part of Highland that, you know, is being transitioned away just as part of, but 30 years or being around for 30 years, something's going to change, right?
Sure. Absolutely. And no doubt we'll keep an eye on that. We'll, like I say, no doubt talk about it again at some point in the future. But for now, we're at the end of another Dave and Dave Discuss. Dave, great conversation as ever. We hope everyone that's listening has enjoyed the conversation. And as ever, if you've got comments, questions, if there's someone on from Highland that can actually show us what the Highland Experience Automate platform does, great, get in touch. We'd love to know that, and maybe do another one of these in the future that dispels all of the claptrap that we've been talking about today. We have got more sessions scheduled for later in the year. We finally get to chat about AI properly. We couldn't avoid it forever, Dave, could we? But until then, goodbye for now.